Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with an author of 4 books and the founder of 4F Media, Danielle Burnock. Danielle, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today.
Absolutely. So just tell my listeners a little bit about who Danielle is.
Oh, well, Danielle is someone who has changed and grown a whole lot over her life. I was born with a different first name, so that's one thing. I was listening to a podcast actually yesterday, and he said something really funny, and I started thinking about my life. Then he said, my wife has been married to 5 different men, but they're all me. I was thinking I have changed a lot too over the course of my marriage. I've been married for 42 years. And I'm like a completely different person. I changed my name legally in 1988, my first name. And I've been on a journey of coming out of trauma. I mean, I had trauma as a child, a lot of different kinds of trauma, childhood emotional neglect. I had death, multiple deaths, bullying, public humiliation, public rejection at church. I had all kinds of things. But growing up, a child, that's just their life. They don't think anything of it. I didn't even know the word trauma until I stumbled across a book in a bookstore one day. I went, wow, maybe I got some of that. So I began, a way of looking into it a little bit different. I knew that I was wounded on the inside because I was messed up and I tried to destroy myself because I hated myself so much. I was in so much pain inside that I struggled, and then there's something's wrong. So I worked at personal growth a lot, read a lot of books. I went into counseling one time with a Christian counselor, but that didn't work out so well. But later, when I started writing my first book, I was 54. I put myself into counseling, this time with just a regular counselor. I was looking for someone who knew the brain, who knew psychology. You need to help me unpack whatever's going on inside me. And boy, did she help me. She helped me a lot. Even though I went through 3 or 4 before her. I want to be careful to say that here, because sometimes if you need counseling, you don't get the right counselor right away. Like I said, I had one that didn't help. And then finding the one that did help, I went through a couple that abandoned me, told me I was a liar. I mean, they was like, you're my counselor? And no. So you need to find a counselor that will actually help you. And she helped me unpack and own the trauma that was in my life. And then I could heal it much deeper. I had healed a lot of it before then. I came to faith in Jesus Christ as a child, but because of what happened at church, then I was on a path to prove God didn't exist because I was so angry at him. And then because his love is real, he chased me down and brought me back again. And through his love, which that's the core of my message everywhere, is love. Because we need to know that we are loved. And I grew up feeling unloved, feeling like I didn't belong. And that was because of the childhood emotional neglect. I learned that from my counselor, because I was telling her that like it didn't matter as I was getting onto a more important point. And she went, wait. And she said, why'd you feel that way? I'm like, I don't know. She said, something went terribly wrong. I was like, never thought of that. And she proceeded to tell me what, being emotionally nurtured would look like, feeling loved would look like. And I was like, wow, that's really kind of amazing. Yeah, I wish I would have had that kind of thing. And that lack of love in me is really what has driven me to try and help others, as I have learned how to love myself, how to receive the love of God and receive the love from other people. There's a quote out there that we only accept the love that we believe we deserve. And that's really true. So one of the things I want to help people do is to love themselves. I have a little 7-day challenge, to love yourself, because you can't love anyone else well if you don't love yourself. I mean, even what Jesus told us to, love one another as you love yourself. So if you're busy hating yourself, you're not going to be very good at loving someone else. So love is my core. I wrote my first book, Emerging with Wings, while I was in counseling with that good counselor. And she helped me unpack the second half of the book. I didn't know chapters 9 through 16 until I was going through counseling. So I encourage people to look at the things that are holding you back, deal with them. So many people stumble at the word trauma because they think of it as an event. They compare it to war, to tsunami, to 9/11. That's what I did. But trauma is not an incident. Trauma is a wound. It's what's left behind inside of you after something happened to you that you were incapable of dealing with. And I've gotten real intentional with what words I use to explain that, because if you just say it's a wound inside you, people go, I should have been stronger. I shouldn't have this. And they blame themselves. We are so quick to blame ourselves and condemn ourselves.
Yeah.
But trauma is an involuntary wound. Some people are more resilient than others. Some people are more sensitive than others. I'm a highly sensitive person. So I needed more as a child than someone who was just more resilient and maybe more laid back. I don't know if you're familiar with the different personalities, the phlegmatic, choleric, and all those. Some of those are like, they don't notice things, it just kind of rolls off them. Someone else, they're crushed by it.
Right.
It's like even trauma people who come in after the plane crash and 9/11, they notice the differences of how people respond. Two people can go through the exact same thing, and one can be traumatized and another one not.
Yeah.
And I want to be very careful to say there is no condemnation for either one of them. The
Right.
one who wasn't traumatized is not better. And the one who was traumatized, there's nothing wrong with them. It's simply how they processed the information. It's genetics, it's personality, it's all kinds of different things that we have no control over. But once we realize things, then we can do something about it. Then we can take ownership of our story. We can take ownership of that pain and start working on it. We can reprogram ourselves with things, like when you want to get rid of a computer, you want to wipe it clean, before you get rid of it. But I have learned that if you just wipe it clean and then get rid of it, I hope you don't have any bad things on there that someone can mine off of that, blackmail you for, because there are people who do that.
Right.
I discovered that. So how do you avoid that? You have to rewrite over it with something else. So that's what you have to do with your soul, with your mind. You have to rewrite over it the truth, over those lies that you're not worthy and you are unloved. Everyone is worthy of love, no matter where they come from. And so many people grow up unloved. And so Danielle is someone who is just passionate about the love of God, passionate about loving yourself, passionate about you have a choice. Only you can change your life. No one can do it for you. That's a quote by Bernock. I absolutely love it. We get one life. Your choice is a gift that you have. And even the guy, Viktor Frankl, who was in concentration camps, he wrote a book, and I love his thing I call a superpower, because I renamed it to take ownership of it to use in my coaching and in my speaking and all the things I do, is they were torturing him and he couldn't stop that. They took everything away from him. They killed people in his life.
Right.
But he learned that there was one thing they were not capable of taking away from him. And that was his power of choice of how he was going to respond to what was going on in his life. We have a power no matter what's going on. I call it our superpower. So we can choose how to go from today forward. Whenever we become aware, we can choose how to go forward. So does that answer your question well?
And I love that, because I think I saw a quote somewhere where it says we can't always choose the music that life plays for us, but we can always choose how we dance to it.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
So I love that, because we really do. We all have a choice as to how we react to things that happen to us. I want to talk a little bit more about what you talked about as far as self-love, because I think that's one of the things that we as human beings often struggle with. We're often our own worst critic, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there are a lot of things that you said there about until you really learn to love yourself, it's difficult to love others. It's also difficult to receive love from others until you love yourself. So, tell me a little bit about that journey for you, as far as, understanding the importance of, loving yourself. And is it something that, you're practicing on a daily basis now to continue that? Or is it coming more natural for you?
That's coming more natural now, definitely, because I believe you have to get to the root of why you don't love yourself. Because there's a reason. When babies are born, they don't hate themselves. I mean, just pause and think about that. When a baby is born, a baby doesn't like try and cut off their foot. You know, they have no concept probably of self-love, but they have no concept of self-hatred either.
Right.
So something has taken place that has put that in us. And I think it's extremely important to get to the bottom of that. That's why I developed a framework called SELF, which stands for see, expose, love, and free, to go through the process to get to the bottom of that, to love yourself enough to give yourself the courage to take an action toward your freedom. What I did, one of the key things I believe people need to do also, and not just get to the bottom of that, but what they have to do when they get to the bottom of that is they have to see their value. We have inherent value. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I believe God created us. I believe he put value in every person who's drawing breath, and no one can take that value away. Inherent is not anything that is earned. It is something that is just put there. You just have it because you exist, you matter.
Right.
And the beginning of probably the core part of my journey to love myself, I mean, I healed a lot before that, but I think a lot of it was like piecemeal. I was like, I had one of my core values as a victorious soul is a warrior mindset. And I have a quote in my book that said, I got to where I am today by refusing to stay where I was. That's just a flailing person going, I don't know how to get out of this hole, but I'm getting out. It's just that drive to do that. So I did a lot of growth till I was triggered. I went through a triggering that took place that sent me back to when I was 6 years old, sitting in my reading group with tape over my mouth, being forced to read to everyone in front of me because this is what my teacher did to me. And this stole my sense of value. In addition to the childhood emotional neglect, I didn't feel that I mattered. After that incident of being triggered, I went home from there and I sat down, I prayed, and I'm like, I'm not getting up until I get some answers. I don't want this happening again. I can't have my life interrupted every time something just out of the blue just sends me off, and I never know when the rug is going to get pulled out from underneath me. And that's kind of a scary way to live too, when you don't know what your triggers are even. So I sat there and God helped me to get to the bottom of why that trigger worked, why I was sent back to my 6-year-old self. What was I telling myself? What was going on in there that happened so fast I couldn't pay attention to it? Like a mindset that's the set pattern of thinking that's set, so it happens in a split second. You're not going, oh, this and oh, this and oh, this. No, it happens in a second. So you have to slow it down to unpack it. And the bottom of it was, I didn't matter. I didn't matter. I had no voice. I had no right to speak. I had no right to exist. And so I started a new process. I developed what I called a silver bullet because in my mind, I don't know a whole lot about werewolves and vampires and stuff like that. But the way I remembered it, is you killed the werewolves and vampires with a silver bullet. It stopped them.
Right.
So I wanted to come up with what I called a silver bullet, which would be something that would be short, that would interrupt that thinking pattern, that when that trigger happened, I would have something I could say that would stop that cascade of thoughts sending me to the bottom of the abyss of my soul and that darkness. And I got 2 words, I matter. And I practiced saying them all the time, every day. And when I would feel something happening, I would blurt that out and it would interrupt that. It didn't always, bring about the complete freedom from that, but it kept me from going down to the bottom of the hole. And it got to a point that those things happen. It's like, nope, I matter. That's a lie. And so you have to find something to interrupt whatever's throwing you down to the bottom of the hole. I teach my clients how to do a silver bullet, but it has to be theirs. You can't use mine. You have to find out what's at the bottom of your hole and something short enough that you can remember it. You can't have like a paragraph. It has to be something quick enough that you can just say real quickly that will just interrupt it, like sticking a wheel of a bicycle that's trying to go by. You stick that and it stops it abruptly. So that's the point of that. But through that process of doing that was really owning my value. And if I see my value, then I'm going to love that, because we love things that we see have value. You know, if we love our husband, our wife, our children, our grandchildren, our dog, our cat, whatever it is, we love peanut butter or whatever it is. We see if something has value, then we will love it. So when we see that we have value, that will help us to love ourselves, because the inverse, that lie says you're worthless, and that's a lie.
Right. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about, you went through a spell where you were angry with God.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that process and how, what it was that brought you back.
Yeah, I was angry at God. The whole thing started when my grandmother died. Well, as a child, my parents, we all went to church, and suddenly we weren't going to church. And I was a kid, so I didn't understand why. So I still went, I took the bus. And, I answered an altar call, I got baptized and all that jazz. And then I went through my trauma that happened there. But that was separate from what happened that really made me angry at God. I felt like God threw me away with what happened at church. So that really prepped what happened, because my grandmother landed in the hospital, and my grandmother was really the only person in my life that I felt loved me, even though I don't know that it was unconditional, but she was a person who I felt the love with, the biggest connection with. And so when she landed in the hospital, I'm like, God, don't let her die. Don't let her die. And then I knew I'd been religionized enough to, you can't think about yourself. You can't think about yourself. You can't think about, so I can't pray for God to keep her alive for me. So, okay, well, we have a neighbor. She just had a car accident and she went through this awful thing. And my grandmother's been helping her. So God, keep my grandmother alive for Muffy. So here in my child brain and my religionized heart, I'm praying this good prayer, and she died. I was devastated. And I was angry at God. He didn't save her. In fact, I blamed her, and almost like he killed her, because, kids, we don't think rationally. Incapable. We have that developmental thing not done. And then 2 months later, my father died, and I watched him die, and it was awful. He had a massive heart attack and was making all kinds of awful noises, and I was there for it. And my mom lost her mind, and that was not her character at all. And so then those things just kind of shattered me from the inside, added to the other things. And we had no help. We had no support system. We weren't going to church. We didn't have any community. I mean, the neighbors brought food, and then you go to the funeral, and then everybody disappears. And that's when I began, it's like, after I got healed, it's like, I want to be for people after the funeral, because everybody's there to the funeral. It's right after the funeral that you're left all alone.
Right.
And so God wasn't there. Nobody was there. I just felt completely abandoned. Our family imploded. We were just a mess from then on. And 4 years later, my brother died. And I knew I wasn't behaving right, because I was acting out of all my pain. And I knew enough about church that, well, if God really exists, I'm in trouble. And so I'm gonna prove he doesn't exist. So I started looking into other religions and stuff like that. And I just hardened my heart toward him, because I was so wounded and so angry. I just so hurt. I wanted him to exist, but I was afraid. I had so much fear inside of me from the multiple traumas and the loss and the abandonment, the betrayal and the rejection. And my oldest brother, before he had died, he took a road trip out to California. I don't know why. He came back with these giant pine cones from one of the Sequoia places. And after that, it's like I had this bend in me that I had to go to California. I wasn't sure if it was him or that Led Zeppelin song, Going to California with an Aching in My Heart. Maybe that's why he went out there. I don't know. But I had to go and I had to go and I tried to go and I lined up this person and then they bailed on me. I lined up this person, they bailed on me. I put an ad in the paper. And so I met with this lady I met through this ad in the paper. And then I had to call the EMS to come and take her away because she was mentally unstable. And so I'm like, I'm going by myself. And I would have. But I look back now, I'm like, the grace of God kept me from going by myself, because that was back in 1976. No cell phones, a single woman driving across the country from Michigan to California. I was going to school at the time, just a community school, basically because my dad had died and they would pay me to go to school. Great motives, I know, not. But this girl came in there and said, do you know anyone who wants to go to California? I'm looking for someone to go with me. I'm like, me? She goes, I'm serious. You got no idea how serious I am. And she and I drove out there and she brought a Bible with her. I'm like, oh, you're bringing a Bible? I'll bring my Bible. What the heck? She had something called the Good News Bible. Never heard of that before. I had the King James Bible, which had been beaten into me that that's the only one, which is another lie. But we read to each other while we were driving. I don't really know why. I read because she read. But while we were also reading the Bible, we were also smoking dope and I was taking drugs and we were drinking. We were doing all of that while we're driving. Great behavior, right? And I'm just 18, or actually that was before my 18th birthday. Anyways, no, I had to be 18 by that time. That was because I was in the one where they made it legal to have alcohol at 18 and then they switched it back to 21 when I was 20. So I could have alcohol, then I couldn't have alcohol, then I could have, so I was 18. And I kept a journal on this trip, which is really good because I wouldn't remember any of it because of all the chemicals, which is how I can document it in my book, Emerging with Wings, because I have the journal. And so I'm writing in this journal about how God's looking out for us because we're behaving so well. I read that and I go, really, what was wrong with you? But he kept us safe. I prayed at one time, which I hadn't done in a really, really long time, because we were calling home, calling the person-to-person call for people who are millennials and such. What that was is you had to call because we didn't have cell phones. You'd call, the operator would answer, and I want to make a person-to-person collect call. So I would ask for myself. And if my mom wanted to pay for the charges, she would say that she was me. And so we did that every other day. She called her family, I called my family, so that they knew we were not dead. So, and one day I was doing that and the operator held a conversation with me, which they don't do. And she said there was a tornado warning where I was at. And so that was the first time I prayed, God, protect us. And I saw the clouds move like an angel was holding their arms out, which freaked me out and comforted me at the same time. And so then it's like, okay, well, maybe God's listening. So I started to think about, talk to him. I'd write stuff down. I encountered people on this road trip. We were gone for 6 weeks, drove all the way out to California and back, went down through Texas and Las Vegas, and then up to the top of California and Washington, Idaho, Montana, and all that through the UP down back again. And we had this one conversation. We kept having conversations. We'd meet people and we'd talk about God and their idea of it. And what do you think about this? And this one guy was talking about end time stuff and some really weird stuff, and kept reading the Bible. And then when I was in Oregon, I'd finished driving 16 hours, been drinking. And I'm driving the wrong way on a one-way street at 3 o'clock in the morning. I get pulled over by a policeman who does not arrest me, does not give me a ticket, but escorts me to park my car at a park so I can sleep in my car. And I used to write poetry and I used to play guitar and stuff like that, mostly for songs and to get the pain out of me. Not that I was awesome or anything. But I wrote a poem or song or whatever after that about one way and how I was going the wrong way on a one-way street in life kind of thing, and how I got a warning. Right. Out of that situation, but still, I just kept doing the same stuff, and the car would break and, someone would show up to help us. And, then it was like one night it was raining so hard that we had to pull over, couldn't see. So we slept in the car in the rest area between Minnesota and Wisconsin. And I woke up in the morning, that morning, and I just felt like I was not all by myself in the car. I knew that Cheryl was sleeping in the car, but you know, I'd been in seances, I did tarot cards, I did all that kind of stuff. So I knew when I felt something spiritual going on. I just felt like I wasn't there by myself, and I felt like this magnetic pull back to God. And so I'm like, okay. And then I gave into that, but that fear took over right after it because, you know, I knew like I said, I was religionized. I knew a lot of religion, and God was this mean, big, bad guy in the sky with a big hammer to smash you on the head, is how I saw him. I didn't see him as the loving, kind father that Jesus came to show us. Religion mangles things. Mm-hmm. Just like Jesus had a big problem with the Pharisees because religion mangles things. And so I gave into that, even though I was afraid. And then I cried out in fear because I thought I was going to die, because I'd been trying to prove God didn't exist. And here I am giving myself back to him. What are you doing? But then the next time I called my mom, you know, to check in, I said, Mom, I'm different. And she goes, am I going to like it? I don't remember what else was said after that, but I think that's just so humorous, because I don't know. I just knew something had taken place after that. When I got home, I started going to church with her a little bit. And then someone else there hooked me up with a place where there were young people. And it was a Friday night, and I didn't want to go because Friday night was party night, and I was still all about partying. And she goes, just go once, just once. You never have to go back. And I really liked this lady. She was very loving, very kind, very gracious with me. So I'm like, I can do once. So I went once, and the music was really cool. I really enjoyed it, and I liked it. I kept going every Friday after that. And that was the beginning of my very long journey. That was during the Jesus People movement, kind of a little bit after that. So there were all kinds of young people doing weird things, and some were right and some were wacky. But so I kind of got caught up in some of that. But I believe that if a person is looking for the truth, they're going to find the truth. Right. Not looking for the truth I want the truth to be, but what really is the truth. Right. And that's what I was looking for. And I hoped God was true, but it's like, I'm not sure. And I hope that I had value. And it took a long time for me to get there, but I believe that God just helped me through that, because his grace, he's shown up in ways that I couldn't have asked for. I didn't have the sense to ask for.
No doubt. So, you know, you went through this trauma, and you sought help and worked through it. And then, you know, you went and founded 4F Media, which is basically to help other people through their trauma as well. What was the inspiration to, you know, help others get through, you know, some of the things that you had dealt with?
The response I got from my first book. I founded 4F Media to publish my first book because I wanted to self-publish on purpose. Because when I was doing it back then, traditional publishing, that if they were going to publish it, they were going to buy my story, and then it wouldn't be mine anymore. If I wanted to change anything, I couldn't republish. I'm like, no, I'm doing it myself. Yeah. So I founded 4F Media to publish that, which stands for Faith, Family, Friends, and Freedom. Because I didn't know where this would go. I couldn't have conceived I would be a podcast host and a speaker and a coach. If you would have told me that back then, I probably would have ran for the hills, but I wasn't ready back then. But I published that book, and it was the response that I got to it that, wow, my story can help people. I'm not the only one who feels like this. Yeah. Really? Because I did. I felt like I was the only one. And that is such a common feeling. People feel alone in their pain. They feel alone in their lives. They feel alone in what has happened to them. Chances are there are many, many, many people who have been through something that has caused the same feeling, not the same exact situation, because trauma is personal. That's a quote that's in my book that went viral, and they translated in all different languages and everything, because it is. Trauma is as personal as every person. You can't compare your trauma to someone else's. It's not the same because the situation is perceived differently by you and how you processed it. There's no way it could be the same.
Yeah. But yet, even though all trauma is personal, like you said, knowing that there's others who dealt with that, and again, feeling part of a community and not feeling alone
Right.
is so important. So I love that. Um, you said that you never would have guessed that writing the first book would have led to speaking and 3 more books and hosting a podcast and all that sort of stuff. When you wrote that first book, was it because I know through my own writing it's many times therapeutic, so was the first book initially really for you to kind of get it out on paper and deal with those feelings, and then once you kind of threw it out there and threw your vulnerability out there to the world, you got this outpouring of, wow, that really helped me? Was that what was the inspiration for the first book?
Because I knew I had changed and I knew I had grown, and so I knew it could help somebody somehow. But when I sat down to write when I sat down to write the book and put myself in counseling to do it, I only knew half the book.
Right.
The first 8 chapters is as far as I had grown. I had no idea how cathartic it would be to write it. I didn't know how I was going to go about it. I just one morning decided I'm going to write a book. Had no idea how to write a book, didn't know about front matter, back matter, publishing, bibliographies, copyright, and what anything's supposed to be in it, size fonts, what kind of font, the margin, the bleed. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so much to writing a book that you would never understand unless you have published a book. And so when I first started writing it, I knew I could help with what I knew. I'm good to go. I didn't expect it to be as hard to share, but then chapters 9 through 16 were new to me. I had processed those, didn't know they existed when I sat down. So when I published that book, which I had committed to from the beginning, because writing a book is a hard journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard journey to write it, to edit it, to go through all the different aspects of it. But I had committed to writing a book. So when I was done writing it, I had to tell myself, you said you were writing a book. It's not a book unless it's published. So I couldn't just write it, okay, good for you. You didn't know, you have to publish it. So I still remember the night that I sent it out there. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done, because I felt like I'd stripped off all my clothes and ran around the world naked.
Right.
Because there were things in that book that people never knew about me.
Right.
People who know me never knew about me. So it was very terrifying, that part. I knew I could help with the first part, but the second part, that was the big scary part to put out there.
Yeah. That's awesome. No, I love that, and can very relatable as well. With when I wrote my first book, and just again throwing it out there and putting stuff in there that nobody knew about me. So yeah, I can definitely.
Even people who write fiction, it's scary for them too, because they're putting their creation out there. What are people going to think about my creation? When you publish something, you put it out there, you're putting a piece of yourself. I mean, I am not my book, but there's a piece of me in it. So how people react to what you have created, to a certain extent, you're going to take it personally, and you have to learn how to not do that, because my book is not me. So, but then my latest book, Because You Matter, we were talking about how trauma is personal and how it's different for every person, which is what led me to, in that book, it's a self-help book written in short little things, so you can do it in little bits at a time, to reclaim different aspects of your life, to take ownership of your mind, to take ownership of your emotions, take ownership of your pain. And so I use my experience, but that wasn't enough, because not everyone's been through what I've been through. So I interviewed 10 other people, men and women, black and white, people who believe the way I do and people who don't, to try and provide for people other ways for them to own their trauma by relating to this person who's been through a divorce, relating to this person who's going to be in the NBA, but then their legs shattered, relate to this person who lost their best friend through murder, through a carjacking, relate to this person who they were a trauma person that goes and helps them, but then he ended up with PTSD, and it's like, and birth trauma and losing everything in a house fire. I just a whole variety of different kinds of trauma, because trauma is personal. So I wanted to provide, male and female, young and old. I mean, one guy was born with cerebral palsy and he was diagnosed with Asperger's later in his life. And so he grew up without knowing that, suffering from that. But they said he would never walk, but his mom's like, I'm not listening to you. And so many different kinds of trauma to help people to own whatever's going on in their life. So I wanted to circle back to that because we had mentioned about it's not the same. So my story is not enough, which is why you interview all different kinds of people, because one story is great, but we need all the stories.
One of the reasons I do, what I do is I believe everybody has a story to share. And I believe that all those stories can inspire someone. And even if,
Right.
Out of all the people that'll listen to this podcast, if, one person's life is affected in a positive way, then that's success for me. It really is. So I want to go back in the beginning. You talked about, how you really base your life around love. And I know when we first connected, you'd mentioned about another guest that I'd had on my podcast a few months ago, Laura Duxta, who she says she's a self-appointed ambassador of love. So tell me a little bit about, how you've really molded love as a theme for your life now.
Molded it as a theme. Well, right before the pandemic, I started doing many more videos. I was trying to get comfortable on video. So I started doing Facebook Lives, and I'd been through a couple challenges of doing it 10 days in a row, doing it 30 days in a row, and things like that. And I'd heard what's going on the other side of the planet at that time in China, and the COVID was starting, but it hadn't gotten to America yet. And fear was happening. And I know that, love drives fear out. They don't coexist.
Right.
And so I'm like, I need to help get rid of this fear. This fear is coming in this earth and stuff. And I started in my lives, I started saying, I'm this lady on the internet who says that she loves you, and started saying that, and it morphed into, no, I am that lady on the internet who loves you. And if you think, how can you love me when you don't know me? Well, people think they can hate people when they don't know people. I can love you for no reason, but I love you because I've learned how to love myself, and I know how important love is. And so I've owned that. I'm that lady on the internet who loves you. It was the biggest passion in my life of raising my children. I'm going to not raise them how I was raised. I may not know how to do it right, but if I do one thing right, they are going to grow up knowing that they are loved. So it has been my passion from the beginning to look for ways of how to do that. And I've had to morph in myself, because as you grow in loving yourself, then you can love others better. So I haven't always done it as well, and hopefully I'm getting better and better and better and better.
No, I love that. We're just about out of time, but before I get to my final question, is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't chatted about in the podcast here?
I would like to encourage people to own their trauma. Even if you can't call it that, if you want to call it a difficult childhood, you want to call it the pain of your past, you want to call it whatever you want to call it, but own your story, like Brene Brown says.
Yeah.
If you can own your story, then you can write a new ending. That's why I have the courses I have. I have a course, Heal Your Childhood Self. And it takes people through this self process 4 times for them to deconstruct their childhood. Because some people are like, well, my childhood was fine. I had great parents. They're wonderful. But they have all these side effects in their lives that they dismiss as nothing.
Right.
But I would challenge someone to go and do that. Sit down and deconstruct your childhood. What about it was good? And, take my course if that will serve you. Of course, I want to help people, get coaching, get counseling, whatever will serve you. I want to offer my services, but I don't want to be that limited. That's something that probably a marketing person would tell me you shouldn't do it that way. But I really love people and I want them to get the help they need more than I want to sell my course. Of course, I got to pay my bills, but your listener, you who are listening, you are more important than you taking my course. Take somebody's course, read somebody's book, do something to heal yourself. Take ownership of your life, like the title of my latest book, Because You Matter.
I love that. I love that. So Danielle, how do people get a hold of you if they do want to take the course, if they just want to, shoot an email and bounce something off you? How do people find Danielle? How do they find that woman that loves them on the internet?
Well, you can Google my name. I'm everywhere. But my website is myname.com, DanielleBurnock.com, and it's BERNOCK because it sounds like the other vowel, Danielle Burnock. And I have, the link to my podcast, my courses, my books, my blog. I have a whole tab of free resources. So I want to help people for free, and I have things that are paid, but whatever will serve them. Just come and get what you need.
Awesome. Love that. So as you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So I asked all my guests at the end of the show, what is one little thing that you're doing on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
When I was thinking about that question, at first I was going to bring up being that lady on the internet who loves you. But as we're asking it, I thought of something else that I have made quite an intentional thing, is I smile at people. I make it a point to smile at people. Even if they scowl back, I still smile at them. Even during the pandemic, I was so thankful. I came across and got myself a mask that had a smile on it and said, smile. So to smile at people, because people, they need to feel like, oh, wow, they looked at me with joy. They looked at me with approval. They looked at me with, something that was good. And even the ones that scowl at you, you don't know what's going on inside their heart. They might be one of those people that they hate themselves so much that your love is bouncing off of them.
Yeah.
So maybe if enough people smile at them, by the end of the day, maybe they'll crack a smile themselves.
Yeah. I love that. And it's funny, that's probably one of my more popular answers of people who just say smile. I've had a young kid who was like, a smile and a wave is all I do. And again, I think that's huge. That's one of those little things. It's perfect for the concept of that question. It's a little thing, but you have no idea what that other person is going through. And that smile can absolutely brighten their day. So I love that. And it's funny, it's becoming a much more common answer than any other. So, hopefully there's a movement going on of just smiling at each other. That would help make the world.
The last time someone smiled at you, how did it make you feel when you were just walking down the street and someone smiled and said hi? Some stranger, because a lot of times they'll put their head down and look at the sidewalk, or they'll look away. It's like, just smile at them.
Yeah,
or nod your head if you can't say hi.
on a daily basis, and he's always smiling and he always wants to go up. He thinks everybody's put on this earth to pet him, but like, you can even see like how he gets affected, like when we walk past someone and they like don't make eye contact or they look away. He's kind of like, what's going on? Like, why didn't they smile at me? So yeah, it is amazing. I experience that a lot, and on our walks, again, you're kind of like, but like you said, you don't know what they might be going through personally in that moment as well. So all we have to do is throw it out there, and it's up to them whether they accept it. So we'll continue to do our smile and head nod and wave, and hopefully it affects somebody along the way. So I love that answer. So Danielle, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. I wish you the best of luck with the books and everything else you have going on. And for folks out there listening, be sure to check out my website at danclouser.com for my other podcasts and blogs, and be sure to hop on Amazon for my latest book, The Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1. Danielle, thanks again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You bet.